Oh, there you are, but you're right.
I think I'm going to sign out and sign back in again then.
Actually, you're okay. The mayor's out though. The mayor's just got a picture, but you're okay now. We see you. Ron's driving home. Oops, we can't hear you. You're probably saying, I hate traffic.
There you go.
That's exactly what I just got done saying. Bad traffic.
There's the mayor.
Mayor and Council, we're having some IT issues tonight, so bear with us when we go through our presentation.
Okay, we're pretty close, right? What do we got?
I got 1 minute, sir.
Well, we've got, I'm just saying we've got enough for quorum right now, so.
Yes.
Ron Claire was on just a few minutes ago.
I can see his name.
Okay.
I can see the leopard skin seat that was Ann Donahue. The leopard may have eaten Ann Donahue.
And I'm back and I can see everybody now. So
And you're back, so we're all set. All right, I've got 6 o'clock. And since I know everyone is really anxious to get going on this, can we assume, Mr. City Attorney, that Ron Claire is here? Actually, we don't need Ron Claire now. We got 4 without him. So we call this meeting to order.
And he is here. He's participating.
Is he participating?
Yeah, he was.
I was going to have him lead the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
He's in traffic. He can do that. He's just driving.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask instead that I'll ask Councilwoman Donahue to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, will do, but I can't stand because I'm trapped in a chair. So here we go. Ready?
All right, let's go.
I pledge allegiance,
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
of the
United States of America
And
to the republic
for which it
stands one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Amen.
Good job. All right, so now we're officially convened, and now we're going to turn this over to Paige, I assume. Let's see. Yes, it's Paige Peterson's show. So we're all ears, Paige.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you for all being here on a Thursday night. Actually, Matthew's going to start it off, and then I'll pick up about halfway through.
Thank you, Paige. And again, Mayor and Council, we are having some IT issues tonight, and I'll tell you more about that later. But I'll be starting the presentation. I'm going to do some of the slides. Paige will do some. And when you see her asking me for the next slide, that's why, just so you're aware. Are you guys currently seeing the full screen?
Well, it's two screens.
Screens. Okay, we can fix that. 1 second. Now are you seeing full screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Mayor and Council, thank you for being here tonight. This is part 2 of your budget work sessions. Again, part 1, which you may remember, was about a month ago now, and was general fund. Tonight's presentation is about CIP's 5-year forecast and of course, City Center. We have some other updates as you'll see. You will also see the adoption dates for the budget process tonight. There are some general fund updates on revenues. One small one, as you see, was $4,600. Another one was an insurance liability dividend of $47,000. Those two together were an additional revenue of $52,000 on the general fund. We do have some expenditures. Most of the expenditures, as you're going to see, is the city center bond payment. So it's the overwhelming majority of these costs. Again, you'll see those in just a second. One of these items is tree maintenance as discussed. There were some questions before about tree maintenance in the city, which you may remember. On holiday lighting, we did discuss that. There is $100,000 in the CIP for electrical infrastructure and new lights. So you won't see that here, but you'll see it on the CIP side. Code enforcement, we did allow for a full-time code enforcement position where before we allowed for 30 hours. Now we're going to do it full-time if needed. We made a small change in the city clerk's department, taking one employee from hourly to salary starting next year. There's some training there in the clerk's office as well. On the human resources and IT thing that you see. So currently we have an employee that is split 50-50 between HR and IT. We've seen the workload now between HR and IT. So what we'd like to do with your approval is make that position just IT, a full-time IT position. And we would like to add a full-time HR position or vice versa. Either way, we want to add one full-time position. Doesn't really matter if it's HR, IT, but we would like to add an additional position. So you see, of course, the 34, that's for the half because it's for a half for each position. So the total cost of that to make an additional full-time position, including benefits, would be $69,160. Any questions on that? I know that's about as clear as mud. Okay. Some other small changes you see, $1,600 in IT, $2,000 in debt service fund. The big one obviously is the city center bond payment of $775,000. Again, we have to plan to make the bond payment for city center for several years, and this is that. This is interest only. We have planned it to be interest only for the first 5 years, $775 for the first 5 years each year. And again, this reflects that payment. Obviously, this is if we're having no other revenues from city center, what the city would make for that bond payment again for the first year. On Magistrate Court, you may remember we moved some monies on the court budget out of the regular line items into a contingency fund for the court if they were needed. The judge had some concerns with changing law enforcement. There may be some additional court costs. So we put that in contingency. There's also a court enhancement fund of $198,000 that can only be used for court expenses. So we have set it up so that that contingency money, if needed for the court, would come out of the court enhancement fund. Certainly doesn't mean that we'll need it, but it's there if needed. A few others is a small change of $4,900. That's a total of $848,000 in expenses on the general fund. But again, as you see in my note there, the city center bond payment reflects 91% of those $848,000. So again, it's the overwhelming majority of these costs are the bond payment. Any questions on that?
I have just a quick question on Magistrate Court.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else that's in the Magistrate Court budget that we can use those court enhancement funds that are sitting in the bank for? If we can use it for contingency potentially, what else could we use it for?
Honestly, sir, you could pay for the entire court out of that enhancement fund if you wanted to.
I'm not sure why we wouldn't. It just sits there. It's just a restricted fund for us.
We could. Paige,
Mayor,
we had this
when
discussion.
we go to build a city hall, we'll have a place for the city clerk to sit. Maybe we can use it to build that portion of the improvements.
Okay, it's not for the city clerk, it's for the city court.
The city court clerk, the court clerk, yeah.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, Mayor. Paige, we had this discussion. We talked about how long we could run the court out of the court enhancement fund if we paid 100% court expenses. Do you remember?
Let me look at their total budget real quick. For about 1 year, we could fund the court 100% out of that fund. It doesn't collect a lot of revenue, so it would only be a one-time thing, or we could use the funds for a one-time expense.
As a general rule, I favor, I favor using restricted money so that we free up other money from the general fund that, if we needed it, if we need it, we can use it. So I don't care if we use it this year necessarily or use it next year, but it would make sense as we spend down this reserve on the city center that, that we take a look at all those restricted funds, whether it's court enhancement or it's HERF, and we use those restricted funds whenever we can so that we don't build up restricted balances.
We could certainly do that. We could fund it for 1 year. I mean, we could pay 50% of the court budget, 25. We could certainly do that. If that's what council would like to do.
Unless you have
If
a
we
good
start
reason to
to-
keep it in restricted.
I don't unless you know of one page.
I don't. I had reached out to Sherry and asked her why there wasn't any activity in the fund if it was being saved for a specific purpose, and she said it was just like for emergencies. But yeah, it doesn't.
You probably should check to see what the limitations are for expenditure of that money. Because the reason this fund built up is because in the past, we thought we couldn't spend it on normal expenses. So, and it may very well be that the answer to that question is going to come from the Arizona Supreme Court's office.
We could certainly look into that. Council know.
It's in our city code what it can be used for, which is, I've looked it up on our website, and it says basically anything to support the court, but I'll also check with the state just to be sure.
I just remember something in the past where we had thought there were restrictions on the ability to spend that money. So and maybe that's changed. So I think it'd be a good idea to understand what the rules are, and if we can convert restricted money to unrestricted money, it makes sense, I think, just from a planning standpoint to do that.
I'll look into that more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions on any of these expenditures? Okay. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Paige at this time. And again, Paige, when you're ready on the next slide, please just tell me, okay? It's yours.
Thanks, Matthew. Mayor and Council, this is our page 1 of our 5-year capital improvement plan. Can you go to the next slide, Matthew? In total, there's 40 projects listed here. The bulk of those is going to be the $4 million for the city center. And then the other significant one is that downtown flood control project that's 1.9 million, but we do get reimbursed half from Maricopa County Flood Control District. So the total general fund is $8,031,500, and then $950,000 for HERF. The HERF budget is so high this year just because we've built up a pretty big cash balance. So it's the cash balance plus the $430,000 in estimated revenue we'll receive next year. So I believe Woody and Richard are available if there's any specific questions on these projects. There's 40 of them, so I didn't think we'd want to go line by line, but just if there were any specific questions.
I have a question. This is Ann. So what are our HERF funds paying for? I noticed, we've got a couple things here that I think they're eligible for. The right turn lane on Litchfield Road. I think the new road coming in. Do we have that? Do we know what that's going towards?
I'll probably defer to Woody on that. I know it's for general road maintenance, and the HERF fund itself doesn't collect enough to pay for all of the road maintenance that the city needs, but I think Woody could, he might be able to help you better with the specific projects HERF is going to fund.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Donahue. Typically, we use the bulk of the HERF funds for the ongoing maintenance of the streets. But, you know, over the last few years, there hasn't been a lot of that maintenance going on. Now, we've got, as you probably know, we've got a large amount of maintenance projects, crack seal, surface seal, micro seal, that are all going to be done in the next month in June. And that'll spend about 350,000 of that. And then next year, starting in July, I'll be putting together the program for the coming fiscal year, and we'll probably spend most, if not all of that HERF money catching up on the maintenance for the streets. Now, if there is some left over, we can use it for things like, you know, building right turn lanes or any kind of street improvements, including sidewalks.
Then I have another question, if I'm still on stage. This might be for Matthew. Matthew, the tree lighting and electrical infrastructure, that $100,000. How much of that is the actual tree lighting? And is the tree lighting and the electrical infrastructure update all together? Is that what we're updating, is the electrical for the tree lighting? And what's the actual cost of that?
Well, it wouldn't just be for tree lighting. It would also be for utilities in general in the downtown area. There's basically the infrastructure there needs to be replaced. The conduit, the wiring, it all needs to be updated. We have issues there. If you may notice when we have the downtown events with generators, that sort of thing, it's because that infrastructure is dated and needs to be replaced. So it wouldn't just be for holiday lighting. It would be so the infrastructure could be used year round. Richard, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I'm asking that, and maybe this is a side conversation, so stop me if it is, because obviously once the lighting goes up, I've already had somebody mention, we're just going to do the first 6 trees. So what if we want to do the rest of the trees or every other tree? So is there still going to be funding in there for that? Or that's what I don't know.
I talked to that person today that brought that same point up to me that you just made. So I'm aware of that conversation.
Yeah.
Richard, are you on the line with us?
And that situation honestly might be fixed by doing every other tree, honestly. So anyway, but there's some validity to it possibly. So if there's extra, maybe we do them all. If not, do every other tree. But before you get going and finish this, I don't know. Anyway.
Right. No, you're right. And we could go further out by doing every other tree. Richard, if you're on with us, do you know what the breakdown is on the $100,000 as far as how much of it is lights, how much of it is trees?
So judging from the first 6 trees that we have gone over, as a cost estimate, about 20,000 would be for the 24 trees to do potential lighting. And then the rest would go to, again, upgrading the infrastructure. If there's conduit that's bad, it will be replaced. If you remember years back, around the orange trees at the base of them, they used to have lighting. And what we've found out is, you know, they haven't been operating for, you know, past couple years either, but, you know, you have water with electrical, which is not good. So it constant shorts, constant corrosion, those types of things. So all that would be taken out. Outlets would be raised up to a decent, probably about 7-foot height or so for use and, you know, taken out of water. And if we do invest in these lights, they would need its own dedicated outlet. So in the case of a trip or anything of that sort, it doesn't affect the lighting that we invested into.
So I guess what I would just say is if it's $20,000 for the 6 lights, and that means it'd be $40,000 to do all of them. If that's in the budget, I would suggest that. If not, maybe we do it every other tree. So anyway.
No, you got great points, because we do have a lot of palm trees, and, you know, doing every single one can be very costly. So I think that's a great approach on maybe potentially doing it every other tree, especially in front of the shops. You know, that's our main focus, downtown area. So investing in every other tree there would be great. And maybe the first 6 trees on the east, west, and south to do that. But on a side note, you know, this is something that we would need to go out for bid or request for, you know, proposal when it comes to the lighting, because it's going to be so expensive. Luckily, we had a vendor that we reached out to, and he put up some sample lighting in the downtown. So Right now, the first 2 trees in the North Island, just north of the flagpole, if you drive by there a little bit later or throughout the weekend, you will see one with 2 lights on and the other palm with 1 light facing downward. So it gives us kind of a visual of what these lights could potentially look like in our downtown area. And they are colors red, white, and blue for, Memorial Day weekend. But again, he offered the, how do you say, the sample, you could say, and those will be up for view up until Tuesday of next week.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't mean this to be trivial in this list of 40, but I do think it's really important. We used to have some beautiful lighting down there. I think it's really important for our city feng shui and our citizens, and especially if we're going to be doing the city center, that will bring probably additional, but for our little square right there, I do think this is a very important number on this list of 40. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Donahue. Paige, I'm going to go back to the previous slide for just a second. Mayor and Council, here's the list of CIP projects 1 through 20. As you see, obviously the elephant in the room is number 1. That's our city center contribution that we've been planning for some time of $4 million. That's $4 million of the 26 in infrastructure. That breaks down to about 2 and 2, about $2 million in utilities, $2 million in the park and city center. As Paige said, between the city center and the flood control district, those 2 projects are 65% of next year's CIPs. Any questions on this list before I go back to the second half of CIPs? Okay, I'm gonna go back to others. Paige.
That was all I have. I'm ready to go over the next slide, which is the capital improvement budget overall, if there's no more questions.
Okay.
So this is our capital improvement plan. It's a separate, our capital improvement plan budget. It's a separate fund from the general fund. So the revenue we have budgeted in this fund is $24,880,000, and that's made up of $22 million for the bond that we're likely bringing to the council in July, and then proceeds from the parcel sale. We're estimating that 40% of the parcels will sell, which would bring in $2,880,000. So the 2 of those together are just under $24.9 million. Then our capital projects that are outside of this $4 million for city center are $3,981,500, and then $50,000 for IT. I wanted to break those out just so we could separate basically our road maintenance CIP projects from capital IT equipment. Then we have our city center cash contribution of $4 million. We spend the full bond proceeds of $22 million, and then I'm recommending that we budget just $1 million in capital contingency overall. So that would make our grand total CIP budget $31,031,500. So since we have revenue coming into this fund, which we typically don't, the general fund would then have to transfer into this fund $6.1 million. So out of a $31 million expense, the general fund's only putting in $6.1 million, and remember, $4 million of that is the cash contribution that we've been discussing for quite some time. The balance comes from the proceeds from the land sale. Are there any questions on that? I know there's a lot of moving parts with the CIP budget. Okay, next slide, please, Matthew. So since we had a couple changes to the revenue and expenses that we went over with you last month, I just wanted to show you this again with the updated numbers. So fiscal year 22 budgeted revenue is 10,371,361. Next slide, please. And now our total operating expenses, including the city center debt payment of $775,000, we're at $10,306,185. So that leaves an operating surplus of $65,176. So I know that when we came to you last month, it was just over $800,000, but adding in that city center debt payment brought that down to $65,000. But it's if you look at it overall, that's including the significant increase we had to public safety and then the debt payment, and we're still in the black. So I feel pretty good about that. And we are budgeting really conservatively on our revenues. So I anticipate our actuals will be significantly higher than $65,000. Next slide.
If I might add one small comment on that page. On the 65,000, as Paige said, don't be concerned about that. Again, it's the city center bond payment is what's bringing it down from our normal revenues over expenditures down to 65,000. However, there's still savings on hand. Even after we pay out the $4 million in the city center from our current cash, we'd still have 10 million cash on hand. So just to be aware of that. It seems tight, but you have to understand the savings side of it too. So anyway.
Matthew.
Thank you.
Did I have a question?
Yeah, it's Ron. On the previous slide, we budgeted down from this year's revenue. From projections, we're down about 800,000. On the top line.
Correct. It's a 10% increase over the fiscal year 21 budgeted amount. So if you look at budget to budget, it's a pretty big increase, but it is a decrease from our estimated ending. So it is a really conservative estimate on the revenue side. So if we do go into a recession and our sales tax does drop, I think we'll be fine.
Thank you.
And part of that, Councilmember Claire, is COVID sales. Sales of certain items, grocery store items, went up a ton during COVID. And now that's retracting back to a more normal world. So it's actually an odd implication of COVID.
And next slide, if there's no more questions, please. So we separate our one-time revenues from our ongoing revenues because we want to ensure that our ongoing revenues can support our ongoing expenses. So we separate one-time revenues so they can pay for one-time expenses. So for next year, I'm estimating $422,000 in construction sales tax. You see that's a pretty big drop from this fiscal year's budget, but that's because of that construction sales tax we were receiving that we shouldn't have been. Then we also have one-time revenue from the American Rescue Plan. And I realize I spelled American wrong. I'll fix that. Sorry about that. And we just received word yesterday. We got updated amounts yesterday. And they increased. Originally, our estimate was $767,863. And now the estimate we got is $806,061. So that was good news. Then that transfer in that I showed you on the capital budget plan, the 6.1 million, that's where this comes in. And so our ending balance, if we were to spend all of our CIP budget, we would end the year with 10.5 million, and also assuming that conservative revenue estimate. So like Matthew said, even though the 65,000 is really tight, we'll still end the year 10.5 million, and that's assuming we'll spend all of that capital money. And then as you can see, each year, the the cash balance increases some as we start to generate more as city center starts to generate sales tax. And next slide, please.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I apologize. Are we expecting any change in our state income with the potential budget changes from the state level?
You have a crystal ball?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We also received updated estimates from the league on that yesterday, and I did build in that revenue decrease. So if that does pass, that's already built into this.
Thank you.
If you go up a couple slides, Matthew, we can see one more, this one. The state share, oh, sorry, down one. The state shared income tax line, you can see in fiscal year 22 or 839,743. Next year it increases. I'm not exactly sure why they're projecting such an increase, but then you can see 24 through 26, it really dips, and in fiscal year 26, the 715,000, that's what they have estimated from here on out. So it is a couple $100,000 decrease for us compared to this year.
Mayor and Council, just so you're aware on the issue, what Councilman Leclerc is asking about is the flat tax that's being proposed. It's a reduction in state income tax. The league is fighting this adamantly. Almost every city in the state is opposing it because it means a revenue loss. That being said, though, for our state legislators, it's great politics to say they're cutting income tax. So while we hope this doesn't pass, it could. But we have planned for that if it does. Thank you, Councilman Leclerc, for bringing that up.
Can I ask a question too?
Yes, ma'am.
I think I've heard rumblings of COVID-19 funds, if they've not been used by a certain date, being pulled back. Have we heard anything like that? And do we have money still out there that we have not used or earmarked for anything?
Paige.
Sure. Yeah, Councilwoman Watson, the Arizona CARES Act funds that we've already received, those have all been spent already because 100% of it had to be spent on public safety. So we're good with those. The ARP money that we're scheduled to receive the next 2 fiscal years, those do have a timeline on them. I don't have that right in front of me, but we have several years. I want to say 4 years to get them spent. Otherwise, we do have to revert it back to the federal government. But I think we're looking at every possible way we can spend that money. So I'm confident we'll get it spent by the deadline and not have to give any of it back. That's also included in our budget totals.
I would add on the ARP funds, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead and finish it up.
There's a lot of provisions on the ARP money on what you can and cannot spend it on. For example, you can't use it to pay down retirement debt. You can use it for water and sewer systems. And that's what we've been discussing using it for. One is our share of the flood control district. That'd be a great expenditure for that. Also our share of the Vista Verde project. That wouldn't spend all of it. Those 2 projects together would spend like 1.2 of it, but it can be spent on city-owned water and sewer projects. But there are restrictions to what you can and cannot spend it on.
Interesting. Also, Paige, you said you were going to do some edits. I noticed where you have Ora Vista on the first or second page, you have ORA, it's ORO.
Oh, thank you. I will
You're
get
welcome.
that corrected. Hey, Matthew, I think we're ready to go back.
Is this
One more.
One more?
Yeah. So this is our last slide. I just wanted to remind everybody of the tentative and final budget adoption dates. We will bring you the tentative budget adoption on June 16th. And then we'll bring the final budget on July 21st. And that is the end of our presentation. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council? Any additional questions? Paige and Matthew, it was a good presentation. Provided us a lot of clear information, I think. We are in very good financial condition, and I think acting responsibly, even though we're committing a significant amount of money to this downtown center, it is something that we can fit it into our budget as we go forward, and I think it will pay huge dividends over the long haul. So if there aren't any other questions, we're done with our agenda, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, sir, that is it. Mayor and council, we thank you. And as the mayor said, Paige, thank you for all your great work on the presentation. We welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn? By Councilman Clare, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Donahue. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you for your time and attention tonight. Thank you for the fact that it was a quick meeting. I'm excited. I actually am going to be able to get in and have some dinner. I want to appreciate, and as you know, I can't maintain this beautiful body without eating. So thank you very much. Good night, guys.
Great evening, everybody, and a good
Thank you,
weekend.
everyone.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys. You have a good night too.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.